I think you should quit basketball. I'm just kidding, I don't want you to quit, but I'm sure some of you have heard this guidance before in your basketball journey. In this video, I'm gonna look at bad basketball advice and explain the negative impact it can have on a young player's basketball journey. The most overused, unhelpful, and misleading piece of advice that I hear given to young basketball players is to be unselfish. And the main problem with this advice is that it makes some players, like myself in high school, think that if they are aggressive on offense and look to score, that means they're selfish. I made a whole video on this topic, so please go check that out, but here's the issue. If you work really hard and are a high-level player, which I would argue I was in high school, then you need to be aggressive for your own success and for your team's success. Instead of there being selfish and unselfish players, I want you to think about it like there are aggressive and passive players. Passive players just move the ball on offense and defer to their teammates, even if those other players aren't as skilled. Again, a lot of times looking back, I was this guy. Then there are aggressive players who put pressure on the defense by attacking. They don't always have to shoot the ball, but they create advantages for their team while making the opposition have to react. We need to stop calling players selfish just because they are aggressive. The best players need to take the most shots, need to have the ball in their hands the most. To me, that's just common sense. Looking back, especially when I was in high school, I hate that I was so worried that my teammates or coaches would think I was a ball hog. I was clearly the best player on my team, and I clearly had the best chance of playing at the next level. In my opinion, I was selfish for not being more aggressive because my team probably would have been more successful if I had been. And quickly, I know some of you are going to bring up a player like Nikola Jokic to show an example of a high-level, unselfish player. But I have two responses to that. One, when Jokic was a young player, I guarantee he was the most aggressive guy on his team and probably took the most shots. And secondly, in NBA games, Jokic is constantly putting pressure on the defense. He has the ball in his hands more than anyone else in that team, and he's the center. Nikola Jokic is not a passive player. He's just a really good passer and playmaker. And I think people get those two confused. If you have put in the work to earn your opportunities, then go out and be more selfish. This next one is definitely going to be controversial. I think telling players to not be fancy or to just keep it simple is really unhelpful. Why is it that if a player makes 10 one-handed passes and 9 of them result in a good play, we always point out that one that was a turnover? So many coaches, fans, and players still have this traditional mindset when it comes to how they think the game should be played. They don't want to accept that the game has evolved and players are more skilled now than they've ever been. I could make a list of all the fancy plays that my coaches over the years have told me not to do. From underhand layups to shooting fadeaways to no-look or one-handed passes to deep threes to even something as simple as dribbling behind my back. That is right, I was told growing up to never dribble behind my back. I'm aware that young players who aren't skilled enough to make these plays consistently are going to make mistakes when trying them. However, if you tell a kid to never do these things because they're fancy and unnecessary, then they'll stop trying to work on those skills, which is what I have a big issue with. Imagine if someone had told Caitlin Clark or Steph Curry to keep it simple, to not play fancy, and they had listened. I'm not saying you are Caitlin or Steph, but if you want to play at the highest level possible, then you need to be working on high level skills. The first reason is a lot of times these fancy plays are actually the right play. For instance, if I hadn't used a one-handed pass here, which again is something that I've been told throughout the years not to do, then the play wouldn't have been made. And the other reason is that the higher level skills you use in your games, the more you will stand out. That is just a fact. And yes, there are levels to this. There are guys playing at the same professional level as I am who are more skilled than me, of course. But for younger players, especially high schoolers, the more skilled you are, the better chance you have of getting noticed. So go work on being a little more fancy and really push your skills to that next level. If your coach gets mad at you, then you can blame this video and tell them to take it up with me. All right, so the college basketball transfer portal opened up last week and it immediately exploded with hundreds of names looking for greener pastures. This is a trend I'm noticing not just at the college level, but at all levels of basketball. There are some really good reasons to change teams. You feel like you need a more competitive situation, or you move to a new location, or your team might just fall apart, like what happened to my AAU team my junior year of high school. But I believe this trend of just leaving a team because you aren't getting enough playing time is going to hurt a lot of players in the long run. I would confidently say that in 95% of situations, if you aren't getting enough playing time on your team, it's not because your coach has it out for you. More likely, it's simply because you aren't good enough, you don't have a good attitude, or you don't have a high enough basketball IQ. And I think there's something to be said for a player that can face this reality and start to realize that they need to get a lot better to get minutes. This might spark you to work harder than ever, and it will also let you face some adversity, which I think is always going to benefit you in the long run. But simply blaming your coach or your teammates and then just deciding to move on from the situation is allowing yourself to use excuses, especially if you are a junior or senior in high school where playing time becomes really important for recruitment. Understand that lack of playing time can actually be really beneficial for you. Leaving a team should be a last resort, not a first reaction. And again, I feel the same way about college basketball. I've seen so many players stick it out after not playing their first few years, and it pays off by the end of their career. And then I've also seen so many players leave for a new situation that's supposedly better and they're miserable. Before you jump ship, think really hard about what your long-term goals are on your basketball journey. I've noticed another trend happening where young players are filming their games just so they can get highlights out on social media or post on YouTube. And I think that's fine. It's good to have highlights that you can send out to coaches or use to promote yourself. However, the great thing about having access to your film is as a learning opportunity. I've recently started working with some younger players and watching their film and doing film breakdowns with them. And it's become really clear to me that young players aren't actually studying their full games. The issue with only watching your highlights is that you aren't able to see the bigger picture. If you think about recruiting, your highlights are what is going to get a college coach interested in you, but a full game is what is really going to get them to trust you. And when a college coach does come to see you play, or they have access to a full game of yours, you have to realize that they're only going to be watching you. If you hit a step back three on offense, that's great, but then you run back on defense and you're lazy, you're not communicating, and you give up an offensive rebound, they're gonna notice that too. I think watching a full game should be like a reality check. What are you actually doing well, and what do you actually need to work on? Don't just focus on the shots you get or turnovers either. Notice when you get beat on defense, or when you don't space correctly and you clog up a potential drive for a teammate. Those are the things that every college coach is going to notice that watches you play in a full game format. In my opinion, if you want to play in college, it's basically essential that you find some way to record your high school games. If your school doesn't do it, then try to get a parent or a friend to film your games for you. But again, you should be filming your games not so you can just make a mixtape, but so that you can actually improve. Have you ever had a coach that told you to stop thinking and just play? I certainly have, and while I understand the sentiment to the advice, I think the logic is flawed. First of all, it really is almost impossible to just not think during a game. Yes, there are going to be moments where you might feel like you're completely in the zone. But to be honest, those moments are few and far between. On the other hand, I think there are so many benefits to thinking as a game develops. For instance, I can always tell after the first few minutes of a game which players on the other team I should be trying to attack when I'm on offense, and which of their players are really solid defenders. I also like to notice which players don't box out, so I can try and fly in and get easy offensive rebounds. Even on defense, I try and figure out who throws lazy passes so I can get more easy steals. Being an intelligent player means being able to think about a play before it happens. And if you just shut your brain off and try and go out and hoop, you are going to miss out on all these opportunities over the course of a game that you could be taking advantage of. Okay, sure, it's probably better not to be thinking as you're about to shoot, but I sometimes like to do this. I tell myself during a game, okay, the next time you are open, you're going to shoot it right away. I'm sort of preparing myself for my next shot so that when it comes, I actually don't have to think at all. I did the thinking ahead of time. Most of the plays that happen over the course of a game are going to be split-second reactions where you're not going to have time to think. However, when there are dead ball situations or lulls in the game, don't be afraid to get your mind moving. Don't just be a robot. Go out there and be a thinker and learner as the game goes on. I am always trying to break the traditional ways of thinking about the game of basketball. Of course, there are many things about the game that haven't evolved, but there are also so many aspects of the game that are constantly changing. And I want you to hear the truth from a player that has gone through a lot of the same things that you're going through and is continuing on their basketball journey like me. And if you want to learn how I play professional basketball, watch this video on how a high basketball IQ can get you paid. I appreciate each and every one of you. Keep up the great work, and I'll talk to you soon.